Hey, Feisty friends, welcome to the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast, where each week we deliver trusted information for women who want to get the best from their bodies throughout their lives. Learn to feel and perform your best through our 4 pillars of performance: physiology, nutrition, mental health, and culture. I'm your host, Sarah Gross, and this is a Feisty Media production. Hi, Feisty friends. Okay, welcome to episode 3 of the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast. This week, we're taking a deep dive into the culture pillar and learning all about innovation and how to be an effective advocate. I'm super excited. But first, a few announcements. Some of you may have heard that we announced a couple of our keynote speakers for the Women's Performance Summit. Drum roll, please. I am thrilled to announce Amelia Boone as our opening keynote. So Amelia is an ultra runner, a 4-time world champion in obstacle course racing. She's also an attorney who has spoken openly about her struggle with an eating disorder. As a former triathlete who has taken up CrossFit now, I'm a bit obstacle course curious, if you will. So I for one am excited to hear from Amelia. We also have longtime friend of Feisty, Dr. Stacy Sims, who will be back this year to bring us the latest updates from the world of sports science. And there are more, but I will save them for future weeks. So if you're ready to snag your tickets for the all-virtual Women's Performance Summit, head on over to womensperformance.com. That summit is March 25th to 27th. And if you buy the all-access pass, you can watch and rewatch the replays all year. So if you can't be there exactly the whole time on the weekend or for any of the weekend, you can watch the replays later. And another thing I realized this week is that I did not give you lovely listeners any way to contact me, to make requests for guests or to comment on what we're talking about on the podcast or just to add to the discussions we're having. I always like to hear from people. I want to know what conversations you want to have more of, even what you weren't interested in, or even if you disagree or have an opposing viewpoint or someone who could speak to an opposing viewpoint. I'm always open to that. So email me, Sarah with no H at livefeisty.com, or DM me over at sarah.gross on Instagram. And of course, follow at feisty_media. And our last announcement before we get into this week's show, we have a sponsor. Yay! Woo! As some of you know, Inside Tracker has been sponsoring all things Feisty for a full year now and has extended that support to us here on the Women's Performance Podcast. I did a test with them last year. A nurse came to my home and took 7 vials of blood. And within days, I had a whole slew of suggestions for how I could improve my diet and improve my inner age, which I was hoping. I'm 45, soon to be 46. I was hoping to come in under 40 for the inner age, but I just missed it with 41. So I've now made it my goal for this year to make the improvements that Inside Tracker told me to make and see if I can get under 40 this year for my 46th birthday. And you could do that too if you head over to insidetracker.com/feisty. Inside Tracker is offering our listeners 20% off over there on that landing page. That's insidetracker.com/feisty. Okay. I just finished listening to the interview I did with our guest for this week, and I'm even more excited to share it with you now that I've re-listened. It's basically packed with great advice for anyone who's interested in advocacy work or how we can be effective advocates for ourselves and for others, and also anyone who feels a little entrepreneurial calling of any kind. This interview's for you. So our guest this week is Kristi Mohn. She is a legend in the gravel cycling world. She's one of the founders of Unbound Gravel. She's basically a born advocate, although she might argue with me on that one, but I'm going to call her a born advocate who comes from a long line of strong women. She's a serial entrepreneur who co-owned music shops, real estate businesses, races, and at one point owned 11 LLCs. Kristi and I had a great discussion about many things, but importantly, how she has managed to create more space for women and non-binary folks in gravel cycling. She talks about parenting by example and managing motherhood with a busy life, and how we need to have an evolving definition of what performance means throughout our lives. So I hope you will all enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Building muscle can be tough, and gains can be so slow, even for those of us who do a lot of strength training. As an ex-endurance athlete who is now in perimenopause, I know this all too well. It can be frustrating to put in the time in the gym and not see the results I'm looking for. That's why it's super important to take the right supplements at the right time. One of those supplements is essential amino acids, which are needed to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis happens when you eat high-quality protein, like eggs or whey. And by supplementing with additional essential amino acids, you can make sure you are getting the full benefit of your training sessions. Targeted essential amino acid formulas can be up to 4 times more effective than just eating protein. I've been taking amino acids for almost a year, and in combination with eating quality protein and a couple other supplements, I have managed to turn the tides on age-related muscle loss, which starts at 30 for women, by the way, and I have continued to make strength gains as I head towards 50. AminoCo has been a long-time sponsor of Feisty Media and has supported all of our brands and podcasts over the years. I recommend starting with AminoCo Perform, and you can grab some at aminoco.com/performance. If you enter the code PERFORMANCE, you will save 30% and receive a free gift if it is your first purchase. Give it a try and let me know how it goes. That's aminoco.com/performance and use the code PERFORMANCE to save 30%. As a lifelong runner and triathlete turned CrossFitter, I am stoked to announce that the athletic eyewear brand Tifosi Optics has joined us as a partner here at Feisty Media. Tifosi sports glasses hit all the marks for athletes. They're shatterproof polybicarbonate, so the lenses not only reduce glare, but also offer scratch resistance, which I 100% need. They stay in place when you are moving. The hydrophilic rubber nose pads actually get more grippy the more you sweat, so they are secure and don't slide down your face even when you're running in hot conditions. No matter what sport you do, Tifosi has shades for you. Whether you love tennis, fishing, pickleball, running, cycling, or just hanging out on the beach. They are super reasonably priced, which I love, so I can have multiple pairs that go with any outfit. And of course, Feisty listeners get a special discount. So head on over to tifosioptics.com and use the code FM20. FM as in Feisty Media to get 20% off your order. That's FM20 at tifosioptics.com. I'll put a link in the show notes to make it easy for you. Okay, so Kristi, I just had to hit record here because you just said we came on the call. I don't know. It was a very rapid transition to you saying you come from a long line of feisty women.
I 100% do.
Amazing. Tell me about the feisty women that raised you and that raised them.
You know, the most feisty of all is my mother. Geraldine is her name, and she's just. You just don't mess with Geraldine. And, the potty mouth I have, right from her. The viciousness for fighting for people's equal rights and all of that, that's all how we were raised. And, she came from a mother very similar. My grandma Tui was just as feisty and lived her life outdoors. My grandma Ruth, who was on my dad's side, they both were nurses and ahead of their time in their own space. And I come from a long line of women that just get shit done, basically. And yeah.
Wow. And so what did you specifically, what did you observe? If I don't know, sorry, Mom, I'm not sure I would call my own mom feisty. I mean, I think it sounds like from what you just described, your grandmother was a generation ahead. So I know my own mother told me she felt like she had only a couple options for professions. And one of them was nursing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right?
I think,
So
well,
like, how does someone end up a generation ahead of that?
I think in the case of my grandma Tui, it really came down to her husband served in World War II and came back pretty traumatized from that. He was a tank driver and saw some really serious battle, lost all of the men in his battalion, and just had to get stuff done. Like he was a railroader and had probably, I mean, none of this was diagnosed, of course, it was all just kind of swept under the rug back then, but really just had to fight to provide for her family. And that's what she did. There wasn't a pity party, it was like just a matter of getting stuff done. And then my grandma Ruth was just a very different, quieter, like solid leader and just rock steady. And I think, and then my mom is just her own thing, her own energy. And it's weird because when I get asked that question, I'm like, I never thought there was something I couldn't not do. It just all was if I wanted to do it or not. So, it never was a question.
Right. And what an excellent, I mean, you're giving me my first question here because I Googled you. I Googled you this morning. And I'm seriously impressed by, your sort of what seems like serial entrepreneurship. I don't know if you would describe it that way, but you came from selling real estate. Yeah. You helped found Unbound. You work with Lifetime now and co-hosting the Girls Gone Gravel podcast with Catherine. Like, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
I didn't for a long time, but the serial entrepreneur has definitely been words that have been used around my persona. So it really came on to me. I was talking to a Start Your Own Business class one time. This was many, many, many years ago. And literally the guy hosting the class referred to me as that. And then I was like, what? And he goes, you have like 11 LLCs. And I was like, what? Well, I mean, at the time, yeah, I mean,
you're just like, yeah, of course I had 11.
Well, I mean, some of them just held real estate. So they didn't really like some of them had real purpose and some of them were just like not tax shelters. Cause that sounds like I'm like loaded and I'm not, but they were like things that housed real estate with other business partners to like make transitions easier and whatnot. So, but at one point we had the music store. I was teaching Spanish at Emporia State University. I'd started my real estate career and I had 2 kids and started with the Unbound team. I don't remember those years and for good reason, because it was, just a lot. It was a lot. Yeah. So yeah. I wouldn't recommend that, but yeah.
You wouldn't recommend it. This is my next question. No. So it's this thing that we see in our culture, like this is the Women's Performance Podcast. And one of our pillars is around culture, right? And we have that kind of cultural hangover, I suppose, from the days when women didn't work as much, and the duties at home, that's in a way, like we know from research that there's still that level of expectation that women are still doing that work. Like, do you, first of all, how did you manage it yourself? And did you have an arc on it to like realize or start to delegate some of that work?
Again, I like pretty big support network around me. My husband is an amazing partner. My mom is here and living, and both of my grandmas at the time when the kids were young were also here in Emporia and living. And then a sister and a brother, definitely a communal effort to raise my children. And then really had some good friends that were part of our journey when they were younger. Because the music store, we took that over in 1996 and the children were born in 97. They're twins. And so, wow, good Lord, did I need help? And, leaned into a lot of people. And I don't regret that. Like my kids are definitely more social, like they're just different beasts because they had like this big network of people helping, but we also really, in all of that, also really qualified family time as being important. So when they were both playing soccer, if they were playing in Manhattan, like my husband and I would get a friend to drive our truck with our change of clothes into it to the soccer game. And then we would ride our bikes there. So we'd do this big effort of a bike ride and then, clean up in the back of the truck and then go watch the soccer games and bring them home. So, it was always kind of managing to make sure that we were able to get in things we wanted to do, that I wanted to do, and still make sure that the kids felt like they were a priority and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That feels really familiar to me.
Yes,
like, oh, good. There's more of us out there.
For sure.
It's like that. It takes a village. Right. And sometimes I think about motherhood in terms of or even parenthood, that sometimes I think we all expect to have this internal vision of what a motherhood looks like, or this I'm not very maternal in a traditional sense. And I really think back on I don't think that that was supposed to be like that. I don't think two parents are supposed to raise their kids on their own. Right. I think that the people who are more maternal, I'm so grateful for folks who are more maternal than me. And by maternal, I mean the people who want to take care of the firsthand needs of very young children.
Yeah.
Right. Who really love doing that. Yeah. I love those people because that's not me. Right? So I want a village that has people with those different parts of their personality.
Sarah, I seriously thought that was going to be me. And it was not me.
It wasn't.
It was not me. I couldn't wait for them to get older so that they could do the things with me versus, me carrying the child carrier or pushing them in the stroller. I mean, I enjoyed all of that, but I also was weirdly okay, let's get past the bottle and the diaper stage. Because, there's other fun stuff we could be doing besides this. So
totally. I'm with you on that. My daughter's 11. So she's just coming into a very fun personality,
right?
Good conversation kind of age, and I'm just laughing it up. I love it. But tell me about, about your story through sport. How did you get into sport? Did you do sport as a child?
No.
And then into your cycling years?
Oddly enough, no, I have a younger sister that's just 13 months younger than me. And we were awfully competitive, almost to the point where we would, it just was a pretty harsh environment, growing up, and she was really, really good at sports. And although I liked him, I wasn't as good as her. And I really kind of realized I'm going to go this academic route, and did yearbook and those sorts of things, the plays and whatnot. And she kind of took the sport lane. And then when I graduated and went to college, I had definitely had the freshman 15, that happens to so many people. And so I did find, I found aerobics. So I was an aerobics instructor.
Oh, and you became an instructor right away, of course. That's
not right away. I was and I wasn't really comfortable with getting in front of people, but I taught a few classes, and then I ended up in California and really just didn't have a gym there. So I started running, and that's where I really found sport, was running, and I loved it. And then you fast forward through childhood, having the kids and the music store. And I found myself into cycling because, one day I looked over at my husband and I was like, dude, you're getting fat. We got to figure this out. That wasn't really the issue for me, but it was more you're not healthy, and you're not making healthy choices, and you're not staying active. And I want us to stay active and healthy through our adulthood, as we age. So he found biking. Long story short, I ended up kind of joining him on that. And I was having issues anyway from the running with my knees and my lower back. So it was a pretty easy transition. And that's really where it came from, was just, I've always been, as an adult, somebody that moves and enjoys the outside, hiking, running, biking. So, yeah. So
you went through sort of puberty and young adulthood without sport at all?
Without it at all.
Interesting. And how do you think that would have been different, or what do you see with your kids now? I'm assuming, are they active or more active than you were?
They both were very active in soccer. In fact, Sydney went to school on a soccer scholarship, and Mason would have had the opportunity to either run or soccer, but he ended up getting an academic scholarship. I don't know, because I look at both of my sisters that were active in sports in high school, and neither one of them are very active in that space now. So I don't know. What have I gotten burned out? I've always loved the outdoors. So I doubt it, but I don't know. So
That's really interesting because I think as adults, we need to choose to continue to be active regardless of whether we come from an active background or not. And I kind of agree with you. It's sometimes the folks who don't, or sometimes people do a different sport than what they grew up with. Right. Like you have to make that choice at some point, especially with sports like soccer. Like I was a soccer player myself. Right. Yeah. But there's not, they exist, but there's not that many adult women doing soccer.
Right. There's not even that many adult men doing soccer. Right. Like it's like the team sports become a bit more difficult to navigate as you get older. So,
okay, let's talk about Unbound. Okay. I'm super curious about this because that started in 2006. Am I right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
2006.
Did gravel exist at that time?
There were some Midwest perennial favorites around. The predecessor in this region was called the Death Ride. And I had actually done the Death Ride a couple times with my dad, as a matter of fact, and my husband both. Unbound came out of directly out of Trans Iowa, which started in 2005. And our founders, Jim and Joel, had gone up and done that event. And they both thought this could be really cool in the Flint Hills of Kansas. But Trans Iowa at the point was what it said, trans. It was like it went across the state. They felt like it should begin and end in one place and picked Emporia. And then I got involved shortly after that. And Tim was one of the initial 34 riders in that group that did the first one.
So 34 people in that first year.
34. Wow. 34.
Wow. And did you have any sense at that point? Like, did you think this is going to be huge?
When I got involved, that's why I got involved. Like there was an economic impact for my community, really, that kind of was the driver. Long story short, I got put in charge of a group to bring events to Emporia. I flipped that on its head and was like, rather than bringing new events to Emporia, we should look at what events are here and partner with those people and see if they want to make them bigger and better, basically. And I was very familiar with Unbound, DK at the time, because Tim had done it twice at that point. And so I went to those guys and was like, hey, I'm involved with this committee. I think this event has some real legs. I'd like to get involved. They thought I was nuts. They're like, you're not going to turn this into anything big. And honestly, everybody in Emporia was kind of in that same mindset, but I was seeing it from the perspective of, Emporia is the right size. Like I knew if we could get this thing to take traction, we didn't have anything else going on. So I was like, we could really get the community behind this. Secondly, it was a really family friendly thing. Like the kids and I would go to the checkpoint towns and, watch Tim come in and then help him get all ready and then go back out. So, and then they also got to hang out with other kids in the checkpoints while we were waiting. So it was like, there was very much community happening in all these little spaces around it. And then, sitting around watching these guys when they would come in and they would be telling their stories. And you're like, there's something really special about what this does throughout the whole entire day, not only for the athlete, but also for the support crews. And that's why I took it and pitched it. And plus the Flint Hills are stunningly beautiful and nobody knows that. Like,
right.
They're jaw dropping and you don't know it unless you get out there and ride in it. And so I really felt like we could showcase a really special part of the United States on a bike. So, yeah.
I love that. And from at some point near the beginning, I'm assuming 20 women, 20 miles campaign.
200.
Sorry.
Go up.
times 10, Sarah, times 10. 200 women, 200 miles campaign. At what point did you sort of start to see the need to drive women's participation?
Really, we weren't getting the numbers, and it was kind of talking with Leland and Jim at the time, and even Tim, just like, we've got to make space. Like we got to give them, we got to tell them that they can do it. Like we have to just be like seriously very committed to the fact that, yeah, it's big, but you can do this, and I always say it's not only making the space for them, but actually literally inviting them and giving them permission, because you're also telling them it's okay to take the time to train for something like this. So it's very much like it's like, we see you, you can do this. Tell your husband it's his turn to watch the kids, like take the time for yourself, like do it.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
what year was this?
We launched the campaign after the 2016 event. So it was it 2015 and 2016 or 2016 and 2017? I'd have to look and see when Ali Tetrick won. I think she won in 17. So I think it was 16, 17. Right. But when we launched it, it was so funny because like behind the scenes, we launched it in 16. There we go. Okay. Because Trump got elected.
That's a memorable event. Yeah.
Yeah.
Deep breath. Yeah.
But literally the guys were like, okay, we're going to leave this open for 2 weeks for women, for these 200 women to get signed up. We'll leave it open for 200 for 2 weeks. And then if they don't get all those spots taken, we'll open them up to the general public again. I'm like, okay. And literally Leland and Jim thought it would take 3 years for us to get to 200 women. And it took us 3 hours.
3 hours. That's incredible.
It was incredible. And it was like, I mean, I know it's kind of started a huge other wave. Like I see all these other events doing this similar things and I love it. Mm-hmm. And, we continue to give preference to women, all of this stuff. And I think that all it took, Sarah, was just that invitation. Yeah. It just took that little bit of like, come on, join us. Yeah. Here's your spot.
It's really interesting because presumably women could have signed up anyway. 200 totally. Women could have signed up, just been there, ready to sign up when the doors open kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it was like that message. And you mentioned earlier the messaging around, you can do it. Ask your husband to stay home with the kids or your partner, Yeah. How did you message that?
I'd have to look back. I mean, I think it was just that we were just communicating it. Like, there were no, if like we got feedback afterwards, like there needs to be more porta potties if you're going to have women out there. And I'm like, I'm sorry, ladies, you're going to have to figure out how to pee in the wild. Like, mm-hmm. I don't think it's realistic to expect an event to completely change. I think like I look at that and I'm like, if I'm peeing in the middle of a grass field, I look at it, I'm like, you don't have to look over that direction. Like there's a really easy way to not see me peeing in that ditch. You just go like this. Turn your head like 10 degrees and all of a sudden you don't see me.
Don't see me anymore.
But I mean, and it's, I get it. I understand that. But at the same time, there's this other flip side of it going, this is part of the adventure. Like, mm-hmm. You have to overcome that. But I think we just we had a women's panel. We just really made it clear that we were doing this. We had our whole 200 women, 200 miles women's panel where Celine Yeager was on that panel initially, and Ali Tetrick and Laura Haraldson, who was pregnant at the time, which was amazing. Rebecca Rush. Who else was up there? I'd have to look at a picture. I'm missing somebody, but it was really, it just was really powerful to have all of these, women in the room and women up there just basically saying, it's our time. Let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like what you're describing feels kind of magical to me. Like in mm-hmm. a way, like in my sport and triathlon, I've heard this so many times. Like triathlon's a great sport because it's open to everyone. Anyone can sign up, mm-hmm. right? And it's in a way, I know it took a lot of energy and effort from on your part, but in a way, it's a very simple thing to say, to extend an invitation mm-hmm. that's specifically for women, to actually have it designed for women or from women. It's like, I know what it's like to not want to pee in a ditch, right? Yeah. Like to normalize that kind of thing. Like, okay, we're just going to agree that we're all okay with peeing in ditches. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's it. We're taking down our bibs and we're doing it, Yeah. Those like really, really simple things that just make a big difference.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think that you talked about in your events is about equal coverage of the women's.
Yes. Group. Yes. Mm-hmm. I don't know, this is one that kind of gets me choked up because I don't think Celine and I had this conversation. a while ago about how long do we have to keep doing this women's stuff, like, and
Right.
I'm like, I really don't see an end in my lifetime. And, I work with an amazing group of people that produce these events, like seriously top notch people that care, like all of that. And we still, like every phone call, I still have to say, if you guys are talking about covering the men, you talk about covering the women. It is, I don't want to hear it come out of your mouth any other way. If you say this, it should trigger you. Say that. And I'm like, I'm not always going to be here to make sure that you think like that, but we have to say, if we're covering the women, if we're covering the men, what are we doing to cover the women? There's no exception. There's no exception. Yeah. And I mean, I think we've gotten relatively good about that. And then I'll hear it again. I'm like, guys, how are you covering the women? Yes, the women, and it's just, it feels almost like repetitive. And sometimes it feels like, well, I hate this word, but like I'm almost like a feminazi, and that's not it. It's just that it's like it's so easy to like slide back into the patterns of the past. And what we're really trying to do is move it to where it's automatic, like where I don't have to fight for that. And fight's the wrong word, but just continually bringing that up in conversation. Like,
yeah,
what
it's draining.
Yeah.
It's draining to always be the person who I feel like that too, like it's to always be the person putting up your hand and going, I know I've said this before, but what about the women?
What about the women? There's 50% of us.
Yeah. And a friend of mine described a time she was doing Ironman coverage, and sometimes it's like little things, it's like sometimes folks aren't trying to intentionally ignore women's media, but they just, so on this particular Ironman, they decided they were going to do 9 hours of live coverage. Right. And it wasn't anything to do with, they weren't thinking through anything. They just decided 9 hours was the time they were going to do live coverage for. And she was the only woman in the room. She's like, listen, you might have one woman over the line at that time. Like you will not be able to cover the top 3 women if you only do 9 hours of coverage. So like, is that important to you? So sometimes it's like those other little decisions. It's not even necessarily like we're focused only on the men, but it's like, we're focused on something else that's just not taken into account.
Yes.
The women's race.
Right. And I largely think that's what happens. I don't think there's like this ill intent, but it's changing that culture is what the tricky part is. And you think you're making headway, and then you go into a meeting and you're like, no. No.
Whether you run, ride, hike, or swim, you understand what it means to push harder, reach farther, and go the extra mile. This relentless drive runs in your blood. That's why Inside Tracker provides you with a personalized plan to build endurance, boost energy, and optimize your health for the long haul. Created by lead scientists in aging, genetics, and biometrics, Inside Tracker analyzes your blood, DNA, and fitness tracking data to identify where you're optimized and where you're not. You'll get a daily action plan with personalized guidance on the right exercise, nutrition, and supplementation for your body. And when you connect Inside Tracker with your Fitbit or Garmin, you'll also unlock real-time recovery pro tips after you complete your workout. It's like having your own personal trainer and nutritionist in your pocket. So for a limited time, friends, you can get 20% off the entire Inside Tracker store and also support the podcast. Just go to insidetracker.com/feisty. That's insidetracker.com/feisty.
No, not really.
Well, and speaking of which, I see you very much as like that cultural change maker on like gender inclusion broadly as well. I know in at least one of your races, you've created a non-binary category. Tell me a bit about that. Like, have you had pushback on that?
I haven't. I mean, I think you'd have to be a pretty brave soul to come and tell me something in that regard. But I know what we're doing. I mean, we have non-binary across all of our lifetime events now. And I don't think our policies are perfect. I think there's always going to be issues, but I think that the big thing that we're trying to really communicate is that communication is really key to all of the success of all of this. And I just really think that there is that space in gravel. I think there's that space in a lot of things, but my particular passion and focus is in gravel. But, and I don't think it hurts anybody to have these categories. So that's where I'm like, I don't understand why you have a problem with it. Like, get over it. Like, it's a bike race, literally. Like, and so, oddly enough, Abby Robbins, who was our first 100-mile champion this year at Unbound, they missed the podium ceremony. They finished after the podium ceremony. And I was super disappointed because I was so excited to have this non-binary podium. But oddly enough, the way the universe works, it was better because we got to have Abby come back and did a separate podium ceremony just for them. And their family was there with their wife and their kids. And they got a ton of traction from that. And what better, and Abby's, if you don't know Abby, they're truly an amazing human. So it's been great to watch the success. It's kind of trickled down to them. Now, I'm sure they've experienced a ton of negative, but hopefully not too much, but I'm sure it's there.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you for creating that opportunity.
Yeah,
it just feels like, I don't know why more sports aren't doing it. I have found innovations a little easier in newer sports.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And I mean, gravel's not riding a bike on gravel. It's not necessarily a new sport, but it's definitely in a boom moment. Right.
Yes.
And kudos to you for creating that kind of platform.
Well, I mean, I got to give a lot of the credit to just our team at Lifetime. Like it was like a collective, like we need to do this. So.
Fantastic. Okay. So on this podcast, we're sort of taking a multidisciplinary approach to women's performance and our four pillars, which are physiology, nutrition, mental health, and culture. So I'm wondering, what does performance mean to you? And how do you make sure that you're thriving and getting the best out of yourself every day?
I did, like, you sent those kind of questions over a little bit beforehand. And I told you, I was like, I don't really like to read these because I'm more spontaneous.
This is why I sent them, because I'm like, that's a strangely large question.
And that was like the one that stood out to me. And I was thinking about that. Like I think performance has to be a growing and evolving definition for you. Just as a woman in sport, like, it's so different for me now than it was, in 2018, I was lucky enough to get to compete at Unbound and, did really well. Like that year I was crushing it at gravel races. And my friend said to me after the season was kind of over, she's like, how much longer are you going to keep doing this? I'm like, I love it. I'm going to do it forever. And then like 6 months later, like kind of life, and Tim was like, are you going to just train like this all the time? And, I was like, I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not getting any sort of signed contracts. And I didn't want that either. And just switched. And that switch was also really hard to like kind of come back from being this person that people expected to see at an event. And that person wasn't there. And so it's like, as I've looked at that conversation around performance, I'm like, I'm existing and doing the things that make me happy and working and reading and learning to do them the best I can. And just really finding joy in knowing that my body can do these things. Like I can go ride a 100-mile bike ride if I want to. So performance for me, it's not like, it's no longer tied to podiums or things like that. It's literally just feeling like if somebody calls me and wants to go do an adventure, that I have the ability to go and do that. And because I love being outside and I love sport so much, I just want to be able to stay in a healthy enough position to just enjoy it and look at the social side of it. So, and
how do you do that on a day-to-day basis? Because I'm assuming you have to do some maintenance work to know that you can go out for 100 miles.
Well, thanks to Celine's menopause podcast. I'm
right.
lifting heavy shit now.
I'm with you on that.
And I've incorporated some jumping stuff into, just like listening to that and realizing, okay, I need to make this switch. I can't spend as much time on the bike. And so really, and then like, I really try to have these routines, right? So it's like in the morning I get up and I make I love my apple cider vinegar drink and like take my vitamins and like finish my workout and immediately do my protein shake. And just like, I try to have these little bits that are consistent each day. And that if I goof up, no problem, just get back on it. Like I might goof up for a week or 10 days, and then it's just circling back to it. It's like, just stop worrying about if you goof up a day and but
I often say that like, it's about how quickly you come back. Like if you goof up, what does goof up look like for you?
Just literally like, oh crap, I haven't taken my vitamins in like 4 days. And, I haven't been drinking my protein shakes, or I'll go for a big hike and not come back and refuel like I should. Like just stepping out of doing the things that I know I should because I get lazy or, if I'm traveling, that happens a lot when I'm traveling. I have to be very, very diligent if I'm traveling or, it's just like, those are the kind of goof up things. I almost never miss like exercise, like some sort of exercise, but that's really, Sarah, nobody wants to be around a Kristi Mohn that hasn't gone for a walk or a run or ridden a bike.
Right.
Like
likewise,
including Kristi Mohn. Like, yeah. I was in a really bad mood the other day and I called my coworker, Michelle. She's like, you just need to go for a walk. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. This morning, I didn't really have enough time to exercise and I exercise every day too. So I just did like a 20-minute run and I'll go out and I'll run as fast as I can. And that'll kind of do me. Like that'll be the difference between a good mood for the day, not a good. And I don't know. I don't understand how people don't have that, to be honest with you.
Well, I think if you do it, you get addicted to it. Like, I think anybody that's not doing it, like I would really like them to do it consistently for 2 weeks. Like, don't make excuses, just go. And I don't care if it's 10 minutes, just go do it. And you'll find yourself in like getting things switched over to that mindset of like, and like the other thing, I don't do it anymore, but I used to do. And I'm a huge advocate for this. Make an appointment with yourself. Put it on your work calendar, block it off. Like when I was training for Unbound, the year I did it in 2018, I literally had it on my calendar. Like if I had a 2-hour ride, I knew when I was going to do it and I blocked it off on my calendar. And if somebody called me and wanted to do a meeting, I'd be like, I'm sorry, I already have an appointment then. And they didn't have to know what my appointment was. It's none of their business. My appointment was 2 hours for me to go ride my bike for myself. That was what my appointment was. And I was very, very adamant about having that time for myself. And my schedule's gotten a lot more flexible now, so I don't have to do it so much as I used to. But if you're struggling with that, make an appointment for yourself and put it on your calendar, block it off. Don't let other people take that away. So,
yeah, I totally agree. And do you see yourself as an advocate for women?
That's been interesting. But I think I've definitely kind of, definitely started kind of growing into that and accepting that. I think it's been that I've been so blessed with such great role models that to me, it just felt like my job was to pay it forward. Like I understand that I have a huge safety net and I understand that I've grown up with all of these amazing women around me and they've given me this platform to jump off of. And so with that, I've always felt like there's a responsibility to pay that forward, so to speak. And so it's just been something that I felt like was a responsibility of mine. And now kind of understanding, oh, okay, this is really helping other women and owning that space. It feels weird because it feels like a different thing than why I've done it, but I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm trying to get in that space.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And do you, like, what advice would you leave to our listeners? Like if anyone's interested in starting a race or even becoming an entrepreneur or want to own 11 LLCs at the same time, what advice?
I guess we used to play this kind of worst case scenario game, right? Like if you're really struggling with that, be like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And literally so many times, like the worst thing that can happen isn't really that bad. It may be inconvenient. It may not feel great, but it's probably not like the end of the world. So I think like being able to believe in yourself, take a chance a little bit on yourself, find that friend that believes you're crazy is the right crazy, and just go for it. And then honestly, reach out. I'd be happy to talk you through it and tell you if I thought it was a good idea or not.
Amazing. Everybody here's Kristi's contact information.
Slide into my DMs. Is that the right saying?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's what the kids say these days.
They're probably beyond that saying. I probably
They're probably like, no, Sarah.
Oh God.
That's what the moms say.
Come on, mom. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Well, Kristi, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really fun. Thank you for being part of one of our very first episodes.
Well, thank you for doing this. I think it's well overdue and it's going to be worth it. So thank you.
Wow. Okay. So much great advice from Kristi. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. There were so many takeaways from this episode, but in particular, I really enjoyed learning about Kristi's advocacy work to create an inclusive environment for all genders across the spectrum. I love how she talked about inviting and creating space for excluded groups and how she's doing that with empathy. And by that, I mean, she's acknowledging that for some people, there really are more obstacles just to get to the start line. So how can we help folks by helping remove those obstacles? A heartfelt thank you again to Kristi for the work that you do and this great conversation. And thanks to each of you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. And actually, when I say that, like, please head over there and write some reviews now. So what happens on Apple especially if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, is that there has to be a certain number of reviews before they actually start to show up on the feed and work for us. So I would love, if you're enjoying the podcast, please go on over there and tell us why. That would be super helpful. And of course, as always, follow us on Instagram at Feisty_media. Check out womensperformance.com. And I'll chat with you all next week. Endurance sports should be accessible to everyone, right? That's why we are so excited to be partnering with Motive. Motive is one of the fastest growing training apps in the world today, with thousands of amateur athletes signing up every month and a nearly perfect 4.9 star rating in the App Store. You are not a template, and your training plan should not be either. Prepare for running races, triathlons, cycling events, duathlons, or swim runs, however your season schedule shapes up, and get training written by some of the best coaches in the world in each discipline who know what it takes to help amateur athletes reach their goal on race day. The app takes the training written by those experts and then creates the most optimal training plan for your schedule, abilities, and goals. Plus, the training is fully customized to your race schedule, how much you can train each week, your current abilities, and the goals you want to achieve in your race. You can use the app for free as long as you want, or get all the upgraded features from the app for just $19.99 a month. But as a Feisty listener, you can sign up at mymotive.com and use the code Feisty for 2 months of full premium access. That's right, you get 2 months of premium for free. So you quite literally have nothing to lose. So head over to mymotive.com, mymotiv.com, and use the code Feisty, Feisty. And on a personal note, I know the founder of Motive, and he is driven to make triathlon and all endurance sports more accessible for the athletes who care about their performance, but who aren't quite ready for a full-time personal coach. If that sounds like you, definitely try the app for 2 months for free. You literally have nothing to lose. For decades, running shoes have been researched, tested, and designed for men. Brands have relied on the shrink it and pink it approach to sell male shoes to female customers. That's why we are so excited to be working with Hedas. Hedas designs athletic footwear for women that elevates performance, safety, and style. Hedas unlocks the science behind women's biomechanics through dedicated research, creates better shoes for women that support their longevity and performance, and establishes new design standards to promote transparency in a male-biased industry. Hedas have a lower ankle collar to reduce rubbing, a breathable mesh toe box to allow for ventilation and to allow for female toe shape, a special kind of plate in the midsole to keep tired legs going, a narrow heel cup to reduce heel slippage and take the pressure off our Achilles, and a rounded instep to create a snug fit. Hedas has 3 shoe models designed for different sessions: the Alma Cruise for long runs, the Alma Tempo for training days, and the Alma Speed for pushing the pace. I've personally been running in the Alma Cruise and I love them. It's the shoe I always wanted and never knew I needed. The fit is perfect in every way. You can get your own pair of Hedas at hedas.com and use the code Feisty20 for 20% off. That's Feisty20 at hedas.com, and it will all be in the show notes.